Mr. President, Honorable Count, members of the board of CPA Australia, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am truly delighted to be here today, and I thank you for that wonderful warm welcome. And I thank CPA for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this 125th anniversary gathering here in this beautiful city. You might ask me, how does it feel to be the oldest person in the room? Well, I'm not thrilled about it. But I am encouraged by old-timers who did great things as senior citizens. Galileo's, one of his great discoveries came at age 73. Edison was still inventing in his 80s. Toscanini was conducting at age 87. And Titian painted the great Battle of Lepanto at age 95. So if there's a need for someone to command a starship and a tour around the solar system, I'm available. And if there is anyone here tonight senior to me, I apologize and congratulate you. As you no doubt know, the states of the United States of America are subdivided into counties, parishes, or boroughs. And my father was employed by the state of Ohio to audit the books of its various county governments. And as a consequence of his finding the occasional embezzler, acquired the nickname of Suicide Steve. He was a numbers guy and took great pride in his mastery of numerical precision. I shared this affection for mathematics, which strongly influenced my educational career track toward engineering. In many ways, the corporate financial departments and the corporate engineering departments are similar. They both are highly dependent on precision mathematics. A subtle difference is that engineers use partial differential equations, Laplace transforms, complex variables, and vector and tensor analysis. The financial department uses arithmetic. The mathematical manipulation isn't particularly difficult, but the complexity of laws and regulations and the myriad of interpretations available provide opportunities for sometimes substantial variations in the reporting of financial results. Assumptions, interpretations, and occasionally just plain errors create the need for your profession. Still, in my experience, the accountant provides much more than just certifying accuracy and compliance. The experienced accountant can foresee the consequences of bad judgment. The accountant's mind is or should be ever alert for inadequacies, ever mindful of potential surprises. In reviewing business opportunities or structural change, the view of the lawyer is obligatory, but the perspective of the accountant can be insightful and can be very helpful. Accountants can be lovable. You might remember the story of the chief financial officer who was meeting with his accountant team in preparation for releasing the firm's annual financial report. The meeting was on a Saturday morning, And the CFO's wife reminded him that he absolutely must be home at 1 o'clock for a luncheon to meet their daughter's fiancé and his parents. Punctuality was paramount. Well, as often happens, the morning meeting uncovered a few issues that required more time than expected, and he was late getting home. Not just a little, quite a lot. The guests had already departed when he arrived. His wife was more than somewhat distraught. She was crying and said, "I just can't believe you. You love those accountants more than you love me." He said, "I love you more than I love lawyers." Calvin Coolidge, an American president of nearly a century ago, said, quote, "Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful people with talent. Genius will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Perseverance and determination are omnipotent." End quote. Well, history is punctuated with tales of perseverance. Edison tried thousands of filaments before he found the one that made the electric light bulb a success. Ernest Shackleton's escape from his ship, lost to Antarctic ice, over snow, ice, and 800 miles of open ocean in a lifeboat with a makeshift sail, certainly one of the most remarkable survival stories ever told. Perseverance. The actress, Elizabeth Taylor, demonstrated exceptional perseverance in her search for the perfect husband. I had the great pleasure of enjoying the friendship of Sir Peter Scott, who was an exceptional biologist, aviator, artist, and oceanographer. He was, as some of you will know, I remember, the son of Robert Falcon Scott, who was the first human being to reach the plateau on which the South Pole is located. In 1910, he sailed from New Zealand in an attempt to be the first to reach the South Pole. His party reached Ross Island and set up base camp there. They started on the ice with motor-driven sledges, used ponies for climbing those steep slopes up to the 3,000-meter Antarctic plateau. The temperatures were 40 to 60 degrees below zero. They battled blizzards and fiercely miserable conditions, slogging through snow and ice month after month. Finally, on 18 January 1912, they reached their goal, the pole. And remember what they found? A tent with a Norwegian flag flying. Roald Amundsen had arrived there a month earlier. Disappointed, they began their 1,300 kilometer trek back to their base camp. Scott and his party almost made it back to the safe northern shore of Antarctica, but not quite. The expedition perished on the ice. Scott left letters, in one of which he wrote, "We took risks. We knew we took them. Things have come out against us, and therefore we have no cause of complaint, but bow to the will of Providence, determined still to do our best to the last." End quote. So I decided I would use some of our time together talking about risk. Risk is a part of all of our lives. There is little progress without risk, and increasingly popular business focus in recent years has been risk management. And in spaceflight, we were and are genuinely dealing with the realities of risk. Take, for example, the trajectory chosen to travel from the Earth to the Moon. We didn't take the optimum route, the fastest or the most fuel efficient or the most scenic. They're all pretty scenic. We selected a very particular route called the free return trajectory. This was a risk avoidance choice. This route would use the gravitational field of the Moon to bend the trajectory of the spacecraft just the right amount to turn it back toward Earth. Then, if our rocket failed to ignite in the vicinity of the Moon to insert us into lunar orbit, the free return path would permit us to avoid finding ourselves on a never-ending sightseeing trip of the solar system. The free return idea worked exceptionally well for Apollo 13. Their oxygen tank exploded on the way to the Moon, giving them a chance to beat the odds and survive to tell about it. For the experts among you, they were not precisely on a free return trajectory, and they were required to use the very unorthodox method of using the lunar module engine to get back to the free return trajectory. All of us tend to worry about the obviously difficult problems. And in the flight to the Moon, there are a lot of those things to think about. And in Apollo 13, the problem occurred not in one of the most difficult sections of the flight, but in one of the most benign phases. Pure coasting flight, no rockets firing. Experience suggests that you will encounter trouble when you least expect it. And that was certainly the case with Apollo 13. Many people ask NASA why they named it Apollo 13. After all, 13 is considered an unlucky number in much of the world. And NASA said, well, we're not superstitious, we're scientific. NASA still maintains they're scientific, but they have not put 13 on another spacecraft. After World War II, as many of you will remember, the Rocketmeister Werner von Braun and some of his German colleagues emigrated to North America and worked on modifications to their wartime V-2 rocket, trying to find ways to fly higher and higher. Physiology researchers started putting animals on those flights. It was the beginning of life in space. The commander of Apollo 13, Jim Lovell, loves to tell a story about one of those flights, and he tells it something like this. Down at White Sands, New Mexico, atop the launch pad, a dilapidated old V-2 rocket. You could hear the countdown, 2 minutes and counting. The oxygen vapors were spewing out of the side of the rocket. Inside the nose cone, 2 mice tightly strapped to their couches. One was quite worried. Perspiration coming out of his whiskers, his tail switched back and forward. He looked at his companion and said, "You know, I'm scared. This rocket could blow up. The parachutes could fail. A mouse could get killed in this kind of work." And his buddy asked, "So why do you do it?" He said, "It's better than cancer research." areas in our lives. Ford would like to be better than Toyota. Every sport team wants to be better than every other team in their league. We are all trying to be better than we were last year, better than the analysts expect, better than the boss asks, better than our competitors. Being better than is the essence of competition. It is the essence of progress. So when, as the video indicated, this young president trying to compete with the Soviets back in 1961 announced that the United States should go to the moon by the end of the decade, he didn't want to just catch up with them. He desperately wanted to be better than the competition. Tantalizingly close to the end of the decade, the summer of 1969, at NASA, all was ready. 7 years of Apollo, the work of 400,000 people, 6 previous unmanned and manned Apollo flights, planning, testing, analyzing, training. The time had come. We were confident, but not overconfident. In research and exploration, the unexpected is always expected. We were not overly concerned for our safety, but we would not be surprised if a malfunction or unforeseen occurrence prevented us making a landing on that first attempt. On July 16th, the first stage of our Saturn V with that 3.5 million kilos of vertical push ignited precisely on time, and we were on our way. What we did not know was that at the same time, a Soviet spacecraft, Luna 15, was already approaching the moon. It had no human crew aboard, but its secret mission was to land on the lunar surface, collect some soil and rock samples, rocket them back to Earth, and claim victory. The first chunks of moon to be returned to Earth. Aboard Apollo 11, we learned of the existence of Luna 15 from mission control while we were en route to the moon. But we couldn't be concerned, really, about what it might or might not do. We had too much work to do ourselves. Too much conversation, not just among the crew, but with the controllers back in mission control on Earth. Every few minutes we would hear, "Hello, Apollo 11, this is Houston." I don't know why they say that. Who else was it? Still, it was nice to hear their voice and their expert advice available when we needed it. The phone open to every contractor and most of the subcontractors, and if there was any question regarding the operation of any onboard component, Mission Control usually could consult with the person who had assembled or tested that component. It was a teamwork operation, responsible for the success of the project. And of course, you know all about teamwork. It's essential to most of us. In order to depart Earth and fly to another celestial destination, the craft must be accelerated to a velocity necessary to escape Earth's gravity, and hence is known, surprisingly, as escape velocity. This is a magic number, but it's mathematically very simple. It is equal to your orbital velocity multiplied by the square root of 2. Now, you may not use the square root all that often, but consider this. Once you're in orbit, if you increase your speed by just over 41%, you are on a trajectory that will never return to Earth. In our business, it's a handy fact to keep around. In all of history, so far as we know, only 24 humans have ever reached escape velocity. It's a particularly unique experience, and I'd like you to picture in your mind just what it would be like to leave your home planet. Imagine that you are in your spacecraft in orbit around the Earth. Your computer confirms your speed, 27,762 kilometers per hour. You're looking down at Ascension Island in the Atlantic at dusk, and you soon fly into darkness. You see some city lights on the African coast, and notice lightning flashes illuminating some thunderheads like neon mushrooms far below you. You see a couple of shooting stars down below you. You and your crew are comfortable, floating, weightless. Cabin temperature and humidity are perfect. In order to leave Earth, you must change your velocity by, let's see, multiply by the square root of 2, subtract the orbital speed. You have to increase your speed by precisely 11,493.3 kilometers per hour. Your skill, you have navigation and control system. You have confidence. You can do that precisely. Your destination on this trip is Luna. In order to get your trajectory aligned toward the moon, you must ignite the third stage of your rocket engine at a very precise time, within a fraction of a second. But you have the skill, you have the equipment, you can do it, you can do this. You put some entries in the computer, you arm the rocket engine. Ignition occurs over the Indian Ocean. You're still on the night side of Earth. You feel the engine come to life. You settle back in your seat. You feel the strong push of that rocket in your back. But in the dark, you just can't see what's happening. There's no visual confirmation. Minutes pass by swiftly. The engine stops. You're floating again. You see a scimitar of light ahead. A sliver of daylight marking the dawn. And your flight back into daylight. In a half minute, you're flooded with sunlight. You can see it. It's overwhelming. You're moving outward from Earth. You're traveling more than 10 times the speed of a rifle bullet, but you seem to be perfectly motionless. You look at Malaysia and the islands of Indonesia below. They're dropping away from you. It's hard to tell. 6,000 or 8,000 kilometers per hour, they're dropping away. The horizon is growing more and more. You can see Australia off to the right and Japan off to the left. And all of a sudden, you can see the entire circle, the whole planet Earth. Kind of a gigantic blue medicine ball covered with white lacy clouds. And it's floating slowly away from you into the inky black sky. And this is a time when you say to yourself, uh-oh. Maybe I should have taken the CBA route. Russian craft, Luna 15, was in orbit about the moon, preparing for descent when we arrived. It circled the moon for 4 days and began its descent on July 20th in the Western Hemisphere, July 21st here. But its landing system failed, and it crashed onto the surface of the moon. That same day, we were successful in starting the descent to Mare Tranquillitatis, the Sea of Tranquility in the lunar module, call sign Eagle. It was a special moment. Reaching a goal that a third of a million or more people had worked almost a decade of their lives to make possible, and a goal that dreamers have been dreaming of and imagined the possibility of traveling to and landing on the moon for many, many centuries. There was a 16-millimeter movie camera mounted in the co-pilot's window, and it recorded the landing approach and the work on the lunar surface. Now, fast forward 40 years. In June of 2008, NASA launches a new satellite to orbit around the moon. It's called the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, or LRO. It has high-resolution cameras to accurately map the moon. Now, jump ahead to this year. An Australian friend emails me and tells me about an unusual video. Someone has combined the new pictures from this Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter with Google Moon and recreated the 1969 final descent of Apollo 11 to the Sea of Tranquility. This video allowed me to see the landing approach just as I saw it 42 years ago. It occurred to me that you might like to see that. Even though it's on YouTube, not many people have looked at it. And no one has ever seen what you're going to see tonight. The people here in Sydney and the people in Georgia have been working tirelessly now for days, I think 26 hours a day or something, getting this short 3-minute film clip available for your viewing. So this is going to be a premiere showing, something completely, and it might not work at all, but we will try. Okay. This slide shows the trajectory to the surface. The actual powered descent of the lunar module to the surface took 12 minutes and 32 seconds. And this is just the final 3 minutes, the part that's really interesting as you get close to the surface of the moon. Now, in the left screen, you will see the original 1969 movie film that we took from the window of the lunar module Eagle. And on the right side, you will see what the crew saw looking out the window in front of them. Now, there is a shaded area there that shows you the exact duplicate of the area that's on the left, so you can compare the craters and see if they are duplicate of each other. The one on the left took place 42 years ago. This pictures on the right took place in the last 2 years. Okay, we've been descending. I should tell you, you'll hear the crewman talking. You'll hear my co-pilot giving altitude and descent rates, and you'll hear people in the background talking from mission control on Earth. We've been descending about 2,000 meters a minute. We're now down to about below 1,000 meters in altitude. My computer tells me that it's taking us to a landing just on the right side of that big crater up in the left-hand corner. The slopes are steep and the rocks look very large, the size of automobiles. Certainly not a place that I want to land. So I took over manually from the computer, the autopilot, and flew it like a helicopter on out to the west to try to find a smoother, more level landing spot. The computer is complaining now and then. You'll hear caution alarms, 1202s and 1201s, which is telling us the computer is a little bit concerned about its operation, but everything looks good, and the people in mission control tell us we can continue. Okay, we're about
100 meters above the soil, looking down at this 30-meter crater, about 8 meters deep. Looks like a real geological treasure. I want to go back there and look at that if I ever get the chance while I'm on foot. We're looking for a smooth spot beyond that crater. I see a smooth spot right up near the top of the screen. It looks like that's a good place to be, and I'm running low on fuel. I have less than 2 minutes of fuel.
Good. In 20 feet.
Getting down below about 70 meters now.
Down, 9 forward.
50 meters, still looking good. In the left side, you will see in the old movie that the rocket engine is starting to kick up some dust off the surface.
Lights on. Down 2.5.
Get a 30-second fuel warning. Need to get it down on the ground here pretty soon before we run out. Okay.
40 feet down, 2.5.
The picture on the left is more accurate, but there's more dust. There you see the shadow of my landing leg coming on the surface on the blowing dust.
Just into the right a little.
We're very close to the surface right now.
Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
We got through. Now this is a picture from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, a vertical picture. Now those others were obliques that were made using the Google Moon technique. This is a vertical shot of our landing spot, and of course what you see there is our landing stage, which carried our fuel and rocket that we used to come from lunar orbit down to the surface, and it served also as our launch platform for our return to orbit. And so for the skeptics about whether we ever landed on the moon, this is a pretty good indication that somebody's been. I told you that I became aware of this remarkable bunch of videographic legerdemain because of an Australian friend. He followed the Apollo flights as a boy, and for most of the past decade has been working with the alumni of the Apollo tracking facilities in Australia at Parks, Tidbinbilla, and Honeysuckle Creek, with particular involvement in finding and improving the audio, video, and telemetry recordings of those historic days. I'd like you to meet my friend, the Reverend Colin McKellar. And over there in that area, there are some other veterans of the Australian participation, is valuable participation in the space age. People that work with Colin, Evan Burton, John Sarkissian, they're over there, and 4 people that actually participated in the very early days of spaceflight and the early tracking work at, there's John Saxon from Honeysuckle Creek, Ham Lindsay from Honeysuckle Creek, Eric Simon from Carnarvon, David Johnson from Carnarvon. All stand up. Ago, NASA announced a project to restructure the archival recordings of Apollo 11 and the work on the lunar surface. The stuff that was TV broadcast and we all, so many of you watched. That restoration is complete, NASA produced 3 archival sets of those hard drives. One was sent to the United States National Archives. One was sent at NASA's Johnson Space Center, and the third set is here, was sent here to Australia in recognition of the substantial involvement of the stations in Honeysuckle Creek and Parks in receiving the TV signal. This is in the safekeeping of the CSIRO Astronomy and Space Science group before being deposited in the permanent archival site. The director of that division, Dr. Phil Diamond, I think is here tonight. Are you here, Phil? Yep. Five more lunar spacecraft and 10 more astronauts landed safely at various lunar locations. By the experiments taken to the moon and the many samples returned, our knowledge of our closest cosmic neighbor was multiplied 1,000-fold. The Russians announced they had no interest in the moon and were focused on Earth-orbiting manned laboratories. Only much later did we learn that that was a cover story for their failed monster lunar rocket. Alexei Leonov was scheduled to attempt their first manned lunar landing. The space race downshifted a couple of gears after the Apollo landings. In the summer of 1975, an Apollo spacecraft commanded by Tom Stafford and a Soviet Soyuz spacecraft commanded by the same Alexei Leonov rendezvoused in Earth orbit, docked, and the crews celebrated with sincere and heartfelt cosmic hugs. The two superpowers' great race had ended. It was one of spaceflight's finest hours. The space race, it was the ultimate peacetime competition, USA versus USSR. Like a war, it was expensive. Like a war, each side wanted intelligence on what the other side was doing. I'll not assert that the space race was a diversion which prevented a war. Nevertheless, it was a diversion. It was intense. It did allow both sides to take the high road with the objectives of science and learning and exploration. Eventually, it provided a mechanism for engendering cooperation between adversaries. In that sense, among others, it was an exceptional national investment for both sides. After our successful first lunar landing, we received a letter from our competitors, the Soviet cosmonauts. It began, "Dear colleagues," followed by congratulations, and was signed by each of the cosmonauts who had flown in space. That was a class act, and we appreciated it. In all history, competition has been a principal component of life. In ancient times, national power was provided by armies and armadas. During the Industrial Revolution, the engines of economic power were natural resources and regimented labor and the ability to transport and distribute goods. Today, the power is shifting to those who can amass knowledge and control the flow of information. The 20th was indeed a remarkable century. In the Apollo program, we believed that we could accomplish what was generally thought to be impossible. We understood the substantial risks, were willing to accept them because we believed our goal was a worthy goal. And this 21st century has the possibility of exceeding those progress of the 20th. All of us can help make that happen, each in our own way. We said that the two words important to all of us are better than. And among the foundations of better than, the first tenet is quality. Everyone wants products of high quality for those applications where reliability, longevity, efficiency, or security are important. But above all else, the most important requirement in any organization is the quality of its people. Intellect is good, skill is good, trust is mandatory. In our world, whether it be a fellow crewman or a flight controller in mission control, I was often trusting that person with my life. Nothing is more important than the quality of your teammates. Another tenet of better than is leadership. There is no magic formula for leadership that will be universally and forever successful. The effective leader must be able to adapt to changing conditions. 67 years ago, during the Second Great War, a flyer disappeared in his P-38 reconnaissance plane over the Mediterranean. The flyer is better known for his writing than his flying. He was the author of The Little Prince, Wind, Sand, and Stars, and Night Flight. He was Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. His unique view of leadership was captured in his novel, The Wisdom of the Saints. He wrote, quote, "If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea." I was fortunate enough to be led by men who made me yearn for the vast and endless sea above the surface of the earth, and I am in their debt. And I am in your debt for allowing me to be with you today and for giving me a most valuable gift, your time. And I thank you very much.